Hi, welcome to Education Roundtable. My name is Larry Petricaro, and I'm here with my co-host Joanna Wright, and we have with us this evening Walter Fields. Let me give you a little bit of background about Walter. Walter is an 18-year resident of Maplewood who was born and raised in Hackensack. He's been a political consultant and an award-winning journalist for close to 30 years. He served as executive director in several private sector and not-for-profit organizations and was the political director of New Jersey NAACP for 6 years. And Walter is also involved with the South Orange Maplewood Black Parents
Workshop.
And as such, he and the workshop are advocating for a policy, not only of equity and access, but a policy that really addresses some of the educational issues that we have as a district. And let me start with just one quick question,
Sure.
and we'll see where the conversation goes. You and your group, I guess the whole group, believe that the access and equity policy passed by the Board of Ed is farce at best or window dressing. So why don't we start with perhaps an explanation of why you believe that to be so?
Sure. Well, it's not the access and equity policy. We actually supported that policy. What we called a farce was the academic placement policy. Access and equity provides choice, the opportunity for any student to enroll in any course at any level. However, the problem isn't access only, it's equity. And equity in our mind is the dismantling of a system that's proven to be discriminatory in this district for over a decade. So you can't have access and no equity. You have to have both. And the example that I always use is in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, as African Americans had gained the right to vote, but we hadn't dismantled Jim Crow, we would have had access and no equity. Equity is justice. And justice in this situation is dismantling a system that's proven to be discriminatory against African American students. So while we're providing access and choice, if we continue to provide that access and choice into the same system that's been discriminatory, we have nothing. It is a farce. So we have to have both in order to make this situation right.
And when you talk about discriminatory, are you thinking that the discrimination is intentional, or the discrimination is coincidental, or the discrimination is just results from other policies that might have been put in place, perhaps with good intentions, perhaps at a time when the district wasn't so diverse? Because having read some of the information that you provided, I mean, I find that the tone is rather accusatory. So when I look at it, from my point of view, I'm thinking, boy, I did something wrong. I'm on the wrong side of history here, and I don't like to feel that way. And I'm not sure that's what you mean, but maybe it is.
Well, it is.
Okay.
You can't get to justice without somebody being offended. That's historical.
And that's fine.
And so it's a little bit of all the above that you cited. I think some of it is coincidental. I think some of it's intentional. If you've seen patterns for over a decade where you know a segment of your student population is being discriminated against and you don't do anything about it, I take that as intentional. I think it's the reason why the U.S. Department of Education on its own investigated this school district. What people need to understand that in 2008, the Department of Education sent out a directive to all high schools, school districts across the country, saying that if you are not providing access to these advanced level and AP courses, that you are likely in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. 2008, under the Bush administration. It's 2015. One of the reasons why this school district was cited was because there was such gross disparities in access between white students and black students that our federal agency that oversees education in America said South Orange Maplewood is one of the worst offenders of this practice. It's why we were among the first group of school districts that they investigated. So yes, I think it's been intentional. If you know you are harming a segment of a population and the data shows it and you don't do anything about it, I can only assume that's an intentional act because you haven't fixed it.
Okay. I mean, certainly the consequences then become intentional, whether people know the. Yeah, I can't defend that, and I won't defend that.
And also, you should know, by law, if we ever walked into a courtroom, I wouldn't have to prove intent under the Civil Rights Act.
What is this? What would you have?
Title
to prove?
VI, all I'd have to show is disparate outcomes.
Now, is this just for clarification from my part? Does this disparate outcome result, or does the fact that we are one of the worst offenders, is that a direct result of the population? I mean, if we were a less diverse community, would it still be a problem necessarily? Is
Well,
it the thing that we pride ourselves on that's the problem to begin with?
Well, the thing that we pride ourselves on is the fact that we're diverse, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what diversity means if there's not equality of opportunity. So you can be diverse and be discriminating at the same time, which we have been doing. So yes, we have a situation where a large segment of our student population has been discriminated against in two ways. They've been racially profiled into lower level classes, and they've been racially profiled into disciplinary actions, because that's the other problem that we have in the school district, where African American students are unfairly disciplined for violations in which their peers, their white peers, receive lesser punishments. That is another problem that we have in the school district. So in two critical areas, academics and discipline, we've discriminated against black children.
As far as the academics go, I mean, that should be fairly easy to identify in terms of disparate outcomes. How do you know that the disciplinary issues don't have some basis in fact? I guess because
we have the data that the U.S. Department of Education has that shows that African American students are being singled out.
Well, but the data, just to help me understand, the data would show, I guess, that African American students might be 5 times as likely to be disciplined, right? But what is it that, I mean, how do you know that it didn't do something that they were supposed to be disciplined for?
Because if an African American student is disciplined for talking out in class, and a white student is talking out in class too, and they receive a lesser punishment, it's clear.
Clear, yeah, obviously.
And that's what the data shows. The data shows that there has been different treatment of students in our school district based upon race. And it's a problem, and this is what people need to understand, because I think we get so caught up in emotion in these two towns. We're not that special. We're as bad as hundreds of school districts across the country who are confronting these issues. Just today in Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia Inquirer, there was an article about a school district where black parents have filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education on the very two things that the complaints were filed in this district. It's happening across the country. It's the reason why not only the U.S. Department of Education, but the Department of Justice has gotten involved, particularly on the disciplinary side, because the Department of Justice has said clearly that you are setting up a school-to-prison pipeline by criminalizing black children in public school buildings. So this is a problem, and this is why I get excited about this, because I think we could actually do something incredible here and be a leader and show the country how to do it right. It doesn't have to be contentious if we're honest, if we stick with the facts, if we look at the data and the research. We could be a national leader. We could be what we claim to be, but we could be it for real and not just use diversity as sort of this mantra and shield to say how good we are. Let's show the country how good we really are. Let's create a public school system where any child who walks through a door in a school building has an equal opportunity, is supported, and we make sure that that child is a success. Colleges are doing it all the time. That's one of the hidden secrets of Ivy League schools. They tell you all the time that once you're admitted, it's our responsibility to make sure you're a success. You don't enter into the gates of Harvard or Penn and Columbia, and there's this perception that, well, you're on your own, let's see if you can cut it. No. Their attitude is, we're going to provide you whatever resource that you need to be a success. We can do the same thing, but we haven't been doing it.
When you talk about the Ivies providing the resources, is that for all students or specifically for African Americans?
For all students.
For all students, okay.
And which is what we've been saying here.
Okay.
If you provide the resources for all students, if you provide the equal opportunity, the access, then guess what? We're going to have a different sort of public school district that we all can be proud of.
Okay. Now, I've unfortunately monopolized most of this. Let me give you a chance to ask.
No,
that
it's all
question.
right, because I understand everything that's basically going on, and I'm enjoying hearing the conversation, so I'm pretty good.
Well, I think this is the example that I would really use. I had the good fortune of working with the African National Congress in South Africa right after apartheid. And so individuals were coming out of jail and they were going to run cities. And there could have been a compromise in South Africa where blacks could have gained the right to vote, and they could have waited a number of years until full democracy was implemented. The demand by the ANC was no, because that's not democracy. Democracy is providing us access and providing us equity because we're the majority of this country, so we should be running this country. We now have a public school district where our high school is predominantly African American. One of the things that alarmed the Department of Education is that when they looked at these advanced level courses in a high school that is about 53, 54% African American, white students comprise about 74% of all AP classes and advanced level classes. How does that happen in a high school that's 54% African American? There's a problem there, and that's why we were investigated. And I think the problem that we've had is that there's a deficit assumption about black children. And these aren't black children who are moving into South Orange, Maplewood. These are kids who from K through 12 are our kids. These are our children. So if they're our children and have done well in elementary school, they've done well in middle school, how is it that when you get to Columbia High School, you have this racial polarization in classes? That's the intentional aspect, because you've seen these kids progress from kindergarten through middle school, but somehow or another, when you get to high school, they suddenly aren't equipped to enroll in the classes that mean the most, because every college admission officer will tell you, you need to take the most difficult classes that your high school has to offer to be able for us to certify that you're college ready. We have something called college prep, which isn't college prep. We need to be training all of our children to the highest level possible with rigor. And that's the other thing I want to talk about, rigor, because I think one of the things that we often hear is that, well, it's because black students don't want to take rigorous courses or black families aren't supportive of children. I don't know of any group of people in this country that have supported the idea of education more than African Americans. We're the group of people in this country that sent our children into hostile environments simply because we knew if they were in a classroom with white children, they'll get a better education. We put our kids on buses to travel 25 miles from our homes because we thought they'd get a better education in another area of a city. We firmly believe in education. There's nothing more important to African American families than education. So this notion that somehow or another this is a problem rooted in the family is just a red herring. What this is a problem of racial discrimination. We don't like to talk about race. We like to talk around race. I have talked about race all of my life. I confront it when I see it. That's the only way we can deal with it. Last night, we had a wonderful meeting with the superintendent, a follow-up to the Education Summit. And what came out of that conversation was some truth. Things like, you know what? Too much of our curriculum is taught from a white male perspective. We don't have enough diversity in the resource materials that we use. We don't use black authors enough. That black children feel profiled in our schools. We're finally beginning to talk about these things. And I think if we talk about them honestly and would admit and acknowledge that we haven't served our children well, we can get beyond this and create a school district that we'll all be proud of. Because we all pay too much money not to have the best education possible. And this is the sticking point for African American families. We have paid millions of dollars into this school district that they have used to discriminate against black children.
Well, I'm going to have to stop you for a
I have to
minute.
repeat
Walter, we're
that
going to have to take a break. So you'll just stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
Television is a powerful and influential medium that allows different groups the opportunity to produce programming that directly affects their own communities. Public, educational, and government access channels ensure that all people, regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religion, or economic status, have access to local government information and the use of a public communication forum. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Hi, and welcome back to Education Roundtable. This is Larry Petricaro with my co-host Joanna Wright, and we have with us Walter Fields this evening. And we were talking about some of the difficulties that African American students have in the school district, and some of the what Walter identifies as structural discrimination, some intentional, some not perhaps, but structural discrimination in the system, which really keeps people unable to realize their full potential. And just prior to the break, we were talking a little bit about the cost, and that was something you wanted to follow up on.
Yes, yes. Mr. Fields was talking about the price that our taxpayers are paying.
We're all paying a tremendous cost in our property taxes for public education. And for African American parents, it's extremely troubling when you think about the fact that we've been paying our taxes in a school district that has basically been discriminating against our very children. It's like you're taking our money and using it against us. And I think that's what I'm talking about equity. It's like, let's create a system where as taxpayers and parents, we're buying the best education possible for all children. We haven't been doing that for black children. We've been paying premium prices for cut rate education. That's unacceptable. So now what we have to do is go back and recreate a school district in which all children, number one, are regarded as capable, are treated with respect, are given the support necessary to become successful and become productive citizens in our country. If we do that, we will be a national model for this country. And I think it's possible, but I think we first have to confront the truth. And I think some people just have a difficult time. These communities don't look like they did 20 years ago. I've been 18 years. It doesn't look like it looked when I arrived 18 years ago. Demographic change is always frightening for people. And as more of these suburban communities increase the number of African Americans and Latinos in these communities, we have to accept the fact that this is a different place. Does it mean it has to be of lesser quality? Absolutely not. But it means that there is a difference. So you can't teach children in the same way. You can't use the same textbooks. You have to introduce materials that are culturally relevant to the population that you have today. We haven't done that.
Let me ask you, Walter, see, I interrupted. The cultural relevance you're talking about is, it seems to me that one of the things a school system should do is to prepare its students to go out into this wider world and to be a part of what I would hope would be a common culture that we would all share as Americans. Like I kind of off target, but I've always felt there's a difference between diversity and multiculturalism, and I think diversity is something that I really value. One of the reasons, you say you've been here 18 years, we've been here 40 years, so it's been a while, and something that we chose, that we wanted. But multiculturalism, I think, can lead to division and not diversity, but division and conflict. So, assuming they all come out of the same, we all come out with the same, and then when you have to respond to this culture, what are some of the suggestions you would have that would that we as a school district would want, that would be culturally relevant to the majority of the students in the district, say African American students, and yet will prepare them, in fact, for what I would assume would be to be productive and proud, Americans.
Well, we were multicultural from day one in America. Because
multicultural or diverse?
We were multicultural.
Okay, go ahead.
We had American Indians here. We had European settlers. They brought over slaves in bondage. We've always been multicultural. We haven't recognized that. So I think for any student today, whether it's a white student or a black student, or a Latino student, or an Asian student, if you read James Baldwin, you're going to benefit from it. If you read W.B. Du Bois, you're going to benefit from it. So it's not as if you are cheapening the educational experience by introducing multicultural education. What you're doing is preparing our children for the real world, because the real world is not predominantly white anymore. This country is not going to be predominantly white in about 25 years. So the real world looks a lot different than the contextual environment of the curriculum we currently offer. So if we adapt and create a curriculum that reflects the real world, and it's not only in literature, it's in language. You know, we have Spanish as a language. What about Arabic? What about Chinese? World languages. Our children are stepping into a world that is fundamentally different than what we've been preparing students for the last 25 years. And so if we change the curriculum, all of our kids are going to benefit, because all of our kids are going to step into this very diverse world. All you have to do is go across the river to New York City and you see the world. And if you can function in that environment, you're going to be successful. I think we rob children when we teach them in a way that is very narrow, that is closed-minded, that reflects an America that existed 50 years ago that doesn't exist today. We need to open our minds and expand our minds so that we're giving our kids a world-class education. We can do that here. And it doesn't have to always take place within a school building. There are so many resources and opportunities to expose our young people to the world that we don't even take advantage of here in South Orange, Maplewood.
Can you expand on that?
New York City, we have museums. You know, one of the things that I can't understand is when we set a school budget, we really don't think about external opportunities for our kids. The whole notion of going to a museum now, you know, you got parents who have to pay out their pocket for a field trip. That should just be part of the educational experience. I always use the example of my school district where I grew up, Hackensack, where 30 years ago, they decided that every sixth grade student should have an opportunity to go to an environmental camp for a week. They pack up every kid in sixth grade, and over the course of 3 weeks, they ship them off to camp for a week. Why? Because they said, yes, we could teach this in a classroom, but why not put them out in the field? Why not give some kids who may never have an opportunity to go to camp, give them that opportunity? It's important enough for us to budget this activity. We have to think differently about education. So while we've been advocating on behalf of black students who have been harmed, we've also been advocating on behalf of white students. We're doing the same thing that the civil rights movement did. The civil rights movement said, if you give blacks the right to vote, white America is going to benefit, because we're going to have a country in which we're truly engaged and we're all citizens. So the opportunity is this, the challenge is this: do right by African American students, and you do right by everybody. And you do right by these two communities. If we keep pretending that you can harm a certain segment of the student population and think that you're going to have a healthy community, we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah, and I can accept that. Then it goes back to what we talked about before, having that honest, what you say, it's hard to talk about race.
Yes.
Maybe that was during the break we were talking about that, and it is. I agree, because I've always felt, and we may not agree on things, and maybe that's the best reason to have a conversation.
Yes.
is to try to understand. Like, I don't know if when I said multicultural, you said we are multicultural. I just think that I've always kind of felt that what makes America a country is not geography or demography, but it's ideals and ideas. And if those ideals and ideas come through all the different people that we bring through the system, then to me that's sort of unicultural, even though everybody is different. Maybe they come at it a different way. You still respect the same things. But I could be wrong.
No, well, look, I think the opportunity we have here, and before I came to the studio this evening, I was watching the mayor of Chicago talking about the charges brought against a police officer who shot a young African-American male 16 times.
16 times, yeah.
And part of what the mayor said is, like, this is a moment of truth, that we can either keep acting as if this isn't a problem, or we can finally confront it. And he said, police officers have to look at young black men differently and stop looking at them as criminals. Stop look at them as our children, as a student, as an athlete. We've got to do the same thing here. Stop looking at black children as not being capable of coming from someplace else when they were born in these two towns and they've been educated through the school district. One of the problems we have is that we don't even know our own children. It's like we've got to become honest about this And part of the honesty is having these type of conversations. The only reason why we have difficulty talking about race in America is because we don't talk about race in America. That's the truth. If you don't talk about it, it's always going to be a difficult conversation. And there is truth, and there is history, and there's facts, and there's evidence that should clear the emotion off the table. But what too many people do is they cling to preconceived notions of who people are. And that's something that, the one lesson that my grandmother taught me, she was from North Carolina, and she would always say when she came up north, she would say, at least in the South, we're honest. She would say, I have lived among white people all of my life. She said, it's no big deal. They said, in the North, you make a big deal about it because no one wants to talk to one another. So part of it is honesty. It's let's have an honest conversation. And if we have an honest conversation, I think we'll find out that people really aren't that much different from each other. I don't know a single parent who doesn't want a best education for their child, black, white, whatever.
Right.
I don't know a single parent who sends their kid out the door and says, I want you to have a mediocre education. I want you to take the easiest class in the world. I don't want you to get a diploma and be successful. Every parent has the expectation that their child is going to receive a quality education so that he or she can have a productive life. This notion that somehow or another segments of the population doesn't want the best for their children is crazy.
Now, our children have been having a courageous conversation on race.
Yes.
And I understand that they're going to do that again in the near future. What did you think about that?
I thought it was great, and I was really impressed by the young man who's the alternate, Philip.
Oh, Philip, yeah.
on the board, because I think he spoke at the last board meeting from a moment of truth, but also a moment of anguish. I think our children who have grown up together, who have been friends, are very disturbed by the racial polarization in the high school. I really think they are.
Yeah, and just for people who aren't aware of this, Philip is a white boy.
Yes.
He's Romanian. I had the opportunity to actually interview him and Nina Kempili, and some of the other ones that Joanna put me in touch with. And the one thing that I keep coming away with, and I keep telling Joanna this, is when you start to talk to these kids, it's impressive how reflective, how intelligent, how perceptive they are.
Yes.
I think as adults we tend to think kids don't have.
Right.
You know, that they don't know anything.
We're looking
I know
forward
what's
to that
better.
Kids Summit.
No,
hopefully we can cover that.
Our two communities have brilliant kids. They are talented, they are committed, they appreciate each other, they socialize together. They don't have any hang-ups.
They don't.
And what they're telling adults is that it's time to stop it. That we want to go to a high school in which we are in classes together. Think it would have been like if you were in high school, if you had a friend that you've been in classes with since kindergarten, you know he's smart. All of a sudden, you don't have him in any classes in high school. That separation is very painful to young people. And I think it's why they've been very vocal. And I'm proud of them because I think if there's anything we can tote as being special about South Orange Maple, forget about the diversity thing. It's our kids. We have some dynamic and special kids in these two communities, and we need to do everything possible to do right by all of them.
I agree, but unfortunately, we're about running out of time. Let's say I have 18 questions. We got to number 2.
This is very good, very enlightening.
But, you know, I appreciated the opportunity, Walter, to have the conversation. There are some things that we probably should still talk about.
Yes.
But and maybe
another show.
Maybe we can work that out another show. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Joanna, thank you for putting up with me. I did all the talking. And thank you for joining us out there.